Captain Hyunwoo stood in the center of the massive chamber, his hands bound behind his back with energy restraints that glowed softly blue. The Galactic Council chambers stretched out in all directions around him, a perfect circle of polished metal and crystal that housed the most powerful beings in the galaxy. 12 thrones rose from the floor like ancient monuments, each one designed for a different alien species that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Ambassador Ji-won stood beside him, her diplomatic robes torn and dirty from their rough arrest 3 days ago. She kept her chin high despite everything they had endured. Her dark eyes never left the towering figure of Veltaris, the crystalline being who served as the council's current speaker. His body looked like living diamond, refracting the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns that danced across the walls. The charges had been read in 12 different languages, each translation making the accusation sound more severe than the last. Humanity was too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to remain in civilized space. They refused to accept the pacification protocol that every other species had undergone. They kept their weapons, their military, their ability to wage a war. This made them a threat to the peace that had lasted for 2,000 years. Veltaris raised one of his many arms and the chamber fell silent. His voice echoed like breaking glass when he spoke. The evidence is clear and undeniable. The human species has rejected every attempt at peaceful integration. They mock our laws, ignore our wisdom, and threaten the stability we have worked so hard to achieve. Hyunwoo remembered the first time he had seen the council's idea of peace. Entire worlds where the inhabitants moved like sleepwalkers, their spirits broken by centuries of being told what to think and how to live. Species that had once built great civilizations now spent their days in meditation chambers, their warrior traditions forgotten, their innovations stifled by endless regulations. Ji-won stepped forward despite the guards' warnings. Honored Council, humanity has never attacked any member species. We have defended ourselves when attacked, yes, but we have never started a single conflict. Our military exists to protect our people, not to conquer others. The insectoid representative from the hegemony clicked its mandibles in what Hyunwoo had learned was their equivalent of laughter. Protection requires no weapons when the Council provides security. Your refusal to disarm proves your aggressive nature. Our refusal to disarm proves our independence, Ji-won replied firmly. We have studied your histories. We know what happened to the Corvin when they surrendered their weapons. We know how the tidal people lost their homeworld because they could not defend it. We will not make the same mistake. The chamber erupted in angry chittering, growling, and harmonic vibrations as the 12 species voiced their outrage. Veltaris struck his crystal staff against the floor, creating a sound like thunder that silenced them all. You speak of things you do not understand, he said, his faceted eyes focusing on Ji-won like laser beams. The Corvin were saved from their own violent nature. The tidal learned to embrace peace instead of war. All civilized species have evolved beyond the need for weapons. Hyunwoo had seen the Corvin in their rehabilitation centers, once proud warriors now shuffling through their days in medicated stupors. He had met tidal refugees who wept for their drowned cities while their leaders spoke of embracing their loss as spiritual growth. This was not evolution. It was extinction with extra steps. High above the chamber, Admiral Taemin watched the proceedings through the observation windows of his flagship. The Earth Defense Fleet hung in space around the Council station like a constellation of defiance. Every ship was armed and ready, but Taemin had given strict orders. They would not fire first. Humanity's reputation was already bad enough without proving the Council's accusations true. Commander Bora approached him with a data pad. Sir, long-range sensors are picking up Council enforcement fleets moving in from 3 directions. They're trying to surround us. Taemin nodded grimly. He had expected this. The Council never took chances with species they considered dangerous. How many ships? 200 confirmed, probably more coming. They outgun us 5-1. And if we fought? Bora hesitated. We might take half of them with us before they overwhelmed our defenses. But the civilian transports would be sitting ducks. Taemin looked out at the vast collection of human ships that had followed the fleet to the Council station. Colony ships, trade vessels, research platforms, and family transports. Over 50 million humans had come to witness this moment, believing that surely the council would see reason. Now they were all trapped. Down in the chamber, Veltaris was reading the final verdict. The council has deliberated and reached a unanimous decision. The human species is hereby banished from the core worlds and all civilized space. You will be escorted to the rim sectors, where you will remain until such time as you accept the wisdom of peace. G1's voice cracked as she spoke. The rim is a death sentence. No species has ever survived out there for more than a few years. The radiation storms, the dead worlds, the pirates and scavengers, you are condemning our entire race to extinction. You condemn yourselves, Veltaris replied without emotion. The choice has always been yours. Accept pacification and live in peace, or maintain your violence and face the consequences. Hyunwoo finally spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite the restraints that were slowly draining his strength. We choose freedom. We choose to remain human. If that means exile, then so be it. The crystal being leaned forward on his throne. You will change your minds when you face the reality of the rim. Many species have begged for readmission after experiencing its horrors. We will consider your application for clemency when you return properly humbled. We will not return as beggars, Hyunwoo said. If we return at all, it will be as equals. Veltaris made the harmonic sound that passed for laughter among his people. Equals? You are children playing with weapons you do not understand. The rim will teach you humility, if it does not kill you first. Admiral Taemin received the signal that the trial was over. The council enforcement ships were moving closer, their weapons powered but not yet aimed. He opened communications to the entire human fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Taemin. The council has pronounced their sentence. We are being exiled to the rim sectors. I want all civilian vessels to form up in the center of our formation. Military ships will provide escort. We go into exile with our heads high and our ships intact. Commander Bora checked the navigation computers. Sir, the rim is 3 months away at maximum speed. Our supplies will be stretched thin. Then we stretch them. We show these aliens what humans are made of. Set course for the rim. The great human exodus began slowly, like a massive organism turning in space. The civilian ships moved to the center while the military vessels formed protective shells around them. The council enforcement fleet followed at a respectful distance, making sure the humans did not change course or try to return to civilized space. Ji-won and Hyun-woo were released to their own ship once the fleet began moving. They stood on the bridge, watching the core worlds shrink behind them. The bright lights of 1,000 civilized planets grew dimmer and dimmer until they were just another collection of stars. Do you think we made the right choice? Ji-won asked. Hyun-woo flexed his hands, still sore from the energy restraints. We made the only choice we could live with. Better to die free than to live as slaves. The rim might kill us all. Maybe. Or maybe we will surprise everyone, including ourselves. Admiral Taemin's voice came over the ship's communication system, reaching every human vessel in the fleet. To all ships and all personnel, I want you to remember this moment. Remember how it feels to be cast out for refusing to surrender what makes us human. Remember the arrogance of those who think they know better than we do about how to live our lives. And remember that they think they are punishing us. They have no idea what they have just unleashed upon the galaxy. 5 years had passed since the Great Exodus, and the Rim had tested humanity in ways the Galactic Council never could have imagined. Engineer Bora wiped sweat from her forehead as she watched the atmospheric processors come online across the barren landscape of New Sol. The massive machines hummed with power, their towers reaching high into the thin atmosphere of what had once been a dead rock floating in space. The planet had no name when the human fleet first discovered it, just a designation number in the old star charts that the Council had abandoned centuries ago. Bora had chosen to call it New Sol after the ancient capital of Korea, and somehow the name had stuck. Now it was home to 3 million humans who had turned a wasteland into something that almost looked like paradise. Her brother Minho approached. Across the construction site, his military boots crunching on the rocky ground. Where Bora built and created, Minho organized and protected. The Rim Defense Corps that he commanded was nothing like the old Earth military. It had to be more flexible, more creative, because the threats they faced out here were unlike anything humans had encountered before. The morning patrol found another one, Minho said, holding up a piece of twisted metal that still glowed with an inner light. Same energy signature as the others. Bora took the fragment and examined it carefully. The metal was unlike anything in human databases, formed from elements that should not exist in nature. It was the 5th piece they had found this month, scattered across the surface of New Sol like breadcrumbs leading to some greater mystery. Any idea where they came from? That is what Captain Sang-Ho is trying to figure out. Captain Sang-Ho commanded the exploration vessel Pioneer, one of 20 ships that constantly mapped the dangerous territories of the Rim. His latest mission had taken him to the edge of known space, where even the old council charts showed nothing but empty darkness. What he had found there had changed everything humanity thought they knew about their new home. The first contact had happened 3 days ago, when Pioneer's sensors detected artificial structures on a rogue planet that drifted between star systems. Sang-Ho had expected to find ruins, maybe some old mining equipment left behind by forgotten civilizations. Instead, he found the Keth. The insectoid creatures were nothing like the domesticated species that served the Galactic Council. These Keth moved with purpose and intelligence, their chitinous armor scarred by years of hard living. They had built a city inside the rogue planet's core, using geothermal energy to create a warm environment where their young could grow strong. When Sang-Ho had first approached their settlement, the Keth warriors had surrounded his landing party with weapons drawn. For a tense moment it seemed like humanity's first contact in the Rim would end in bloodshed. Then their leader, a massive female called Zakth, had done something unexpected. She had ordered her warriors to lower their weapons and invited the humans inside for food and conversation. The story Zakth told was one that Sang-Ho recognized all too well. The Keth had once been proud members of the Galactic Council, their hive minds contributing to the collective wisdom of civilized space. But when the Council demanded they undergo genetic modification to make them more docile and controllable, the Keth had refused. The war that followed had lasted 50 years and ended with most of their species dead or enslaved. Only a few thousand had escaped to the Rim, where they had been hiding ever since. Your people were cast out for keeping weapons, Zakth had said, her mandibles clicking with what Sang-Ho learned was amusement. We were cast out for keeping our minds. Perhaps we have more in common than either of us expected. The second contact had come when Pioneer discovered a water world on the edge of a nebula. The Tidal who lived there were refugees from their species' homeworld, which had been flooded when the Council redirected an asteroid to create a more peaceful water environment. The surviving Tidal had watched their cities drown while their leaders praised the wisdom of accepting change without resistance. These Tidal were different from their pacified cousins. They had built floating cities that rode the massive waves of their new ocean world, and their warriors still remembered the old songs of their people. Their leader, an elderly female named Siren Ka, had wept when she learned that humans still possessed their weapons and their will to fight. Now, back on New Sol, Bora was trying to understand the implications of what humanity had discovered. The Rim was not empty wasteland as the Council claimed. It was a refuge for every species that had refused to surrender their identity for the promise of peace. How many of them are out there? She asked Minho. Sang-Ho thinks maybe a dozen different species, scattered across hundreds of worlds. All of them hiding, all of them just trying to survive, and all of them afraid to trust anyone else. Until now. Dr. So Young arrived at the construction site in a hover transport loaded with scientific equipment. She was the colony's chief researcher, a woman who had spent the last 5 years studying every strange phenomenon the Rim had to offer. Where others saw dead worlds and dangerous radiation storms, So Young saw opportunities and mysteries waiting to be solved. The atmospheric processors are working perfectly, she said to Bora, checking her datapad. Better than perfectly, actually. The energy readings are off the charts. Off the charts how? The machines are producing twice as much atmospheric pressure as they should be able to generate with the power we are giving them. It is like the planet itself is helping them work. Bo-Ra frowned at her instruments. That should not be possible. Nothing about the rim should be possible according to Council science, So-Young replied. The radiation storms that move in patterns, instead of randomly. The dark energy fields that seem to respond to observation. The ancient structures that show up on deep scans but disappear when we get close. This entire region of space operates by rules that the Council never bothered to understand. Minho pointed to the metal fragment Bo-Ra still held. And these? So-Young took the fragment and ran it through a portable scanner. Same as the others. The metal is definitely artificial, but it was created using technology that makes our best engineering look primitive. I estimate it is at least 50,000 years old, possibly much older. 50,000 years, Bo-Ra repeated. Who could have built something like that? I call them the precursors, whoever they were. They left traces all over the rim, but always in fragments like this. As if something destroyed their civilization so completely that only tiny pieces survived. Admiral Taemin's replacement, Admiral Jun Seo, arrived at New Seoul that afternoon with news from the Fleet Command. The human exodus had split into dozens of smaller groups, each one establishing colonies on different worlds throughout the rim. The diversity of environments had forced humans to adapt and innovate in ways they never had before. The colonies on Frost Harbor have developed new ice mining techniques that let them extract water from comets, Jun Seo reported. The research station at Red Canyon has found deposits of rare minerals that the Council would kill for. And the EU agricultural worlds are producing food surpluses that we can trade with our new neighbors. Bo-Ra looked up from her work. Speaking of neighbors, what does the Fleet Command think about Sang-Ho's discoveries? Officially, we are proceeding with caution. Unofficially, I think this might be the best thing that has happened to humanity since we learned to build starships. How so? Jun Seo gestured toward the horizon where the lights of New Seoul's growing city sparkled in the distance. The Council sent us out here to die alone. Instead, we found allies, species that understand what it means to choose freedom over safety. We are not building just human colonies anymore. We are building something new. Minho activated his communication device and contacted Captain Sang-Ho aboard Pioneer. What is your status, Captain? Sang-Ho's voice crackled through the static of the rim's electromagnetic interference. We have just made contact with a group of Corvan survivors on a moon in the Shattered Belt. They still remember their warrior traditions, and they are very interested in our proposal for mutual defense agreements. How many? About 10,000, living in underground cities that they carved out of solid rock. Their leader wants to meet with Admiral Jun Seo personally. Jun Seo took the communicator. Tell them I will be there within the week. And Sang-Ho? Make sure they understand we are not looking for subjects or servants. We want partners. As the day cycle ended on New Seoul, Bo-Ra stood with her brother and So-Young watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The atmospheric processors had given the planet weather patterns that created spectacular displays of light and color every evening. Do you think the Council knows what is happening out here? Bo-Ra asked. So-Young checked her long-range communication array. The signals we intercept from core space suggest they think we are all dead or dying. They have written us off as another failed experiment in exile. Good, Minho said firmly. Let them think that. By the time they realize their mistake, it will be too late to stop what we are building. And what exactly are we building? So-Young pointed to the metal fragment that Bo-Ra still carried. We are building something the galaxy has not seen for 50,000 years. A civilization that chooses cooperation over domination, diversity over conformity. 15 years had transformed the rim from a wasteland into something that defied every prediction the Galactic Council had made. Commander Jae-hyuk stood on the bridge of the orbital shipyard above New Seoul, watching as the massive dreadnought Defiance prepared for its maiden voyage. The ship was a testament to everything humanity and their allies had achieved together. Human engineering, Keth metallurgy, tidal energy systems, and Corvan weapons technology, all working in perfect harmony. The Defiance was 3 kilometers, long and armed with weapons that combined the best innovations of 4 different species. Its hull was covered with the same mysterious metal that Dr. So Young had been studying for over a decade, now mass-produced in forges that the precursors had left behind. The ship represented everything the Galactic Council feared about uncontrolled technological development, and everything the Rim Confederation had achieved through voluntary cooperation. Jae-hyuk remembered when the Rim Defense Corps had been nothing more than converted civilian ships with jury-rigged weapons. Now they commanded a fleet of vessels that could challenge anything the Council possessed. The transformation had not been easy, and it had required sacrifices that sometimes kept him awake at night. Director Yoonji approached him with a datapad containing the latest intelligence reports from the core worlds. She had spent the last 10 years building a network of spies and informants that reached deep into Council territory. What they had discovered would have been laughable if it were not so tragic. "The situation is getting worse," she said, handing him the reports. "The Hegemony lost another trade convoy to pirates last week. The Council's response was to hold a meditation session for the victims' families." Jae-hyuk scanned the intelligence summaries with growing amazement. The core worlds were falling apart. Without external threats to unite them, the Council species had grown soft and complacent. Their pacified fleets could barely handle routine patrol duties, let alone defend against the criminal organizations that now operated freely throughout civilized space. "How many member worlds have requested increased security in the last year?" 47. The Council's response has been to send meditation instructors and conflict resolution specialists. While their cities burn, the Council insists that violence only creates more violence. They believe that accepting criminal activity with patience and understanding will eventually convince the criminals to choose peace. Jae-hyuk set down the datapad and looked out at the fleet that was assembling. Around the Defiance, Keth hive ships with their organic curves and chitinous armor, tidal vessels that flowed like water through space, Corvin warships built like flying fortresses, and human ships that combined the best elements of all their allies' designs. What does President Do-hwan think about all this? He is torn. Part of him wants to let the Council face the consequences of their choices, but the humanitarian in him cannot stand by while innocent people suffer. President Do-hwan had been elected leader of the Rim Confederation 3 years ago, when the alliance of refugee species had grown large enough to need formal government. He was a former Earth diplomat who had spent his early career trying to find peaceful solutions to interplanetary conflicts. The irony that he now commanded the most powerful military force in the galaxy was not lost on anyone. Dr. So Young's voice came over the shipyard's communication system, calling all senior staff to the main conference room. At 75 years old, she was still the Confederation's chief science advisor, and her research had unlocked secrets that the Council had never imagined possible. The conference room was a marvel of multi-species engineering, with environmental controls that could accommodate the needs of a dozen different alien physiologies. Keth delegates hung from specially designed perches while tidal representatives floated in mobile water tanks. The Corvin ambassador wore the ceremonial armor of his people, polished to mirror brightness. So Young activated the holographic display that dominated the center of the room. The three-dimensional image showed a detailed map of the galaxy, with the core worlds glowing softly blue and the rim territories marked in various other colors. But it was the area beyond the galactic edge that drew everyone's attention, a region of absolute darkness punctuated by strange energy readings. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem," So Young began. "My analysis of the precursor artifacts has finally yielded results, and what I have learned should terrify us all." The hologram zoomed in on the dark region beyond the galaxy. Faint shapes became visible. Massive objects that dwarfed even the largest space stations. They moved in formation like a vast fleet, but their energy signatures were unlike anything in any database. The precursors did not disappear mysteriously 50,000 years ago. They were destroyed by an invasion from outside our galaxy. These objects are the advanced scouts of the same force that wiped out a civilization far more advanced than anything we possess today. Commander Zakath, speaking for the Keth delegation, clicked her mandibles in the pattern that indicated deep concern. "How long before they reach our territory?" Based on their current speed and trajectory, I estimate between 5 and 10 years. Maybe less if they detect our activities and decide to accelerate their approach. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galactic Council's pacified fleets would be helpless against such a threat. Even the Rim Confederation's impressive military might pale in comparison to forces that had destroyed the precursors. President Do Hwan appeared on the room's main screen, calling in from his office on the capital world of Haven. Dr. So Young, do we have any idea what these invaders want? The precursor records are fragmentary, but they seem to be some kind of machine intelligence that consumes organic life to fuel its expansion. They are not interested in conquest or diplomation. They simply consume everything in their path and move on to the next target. Admiral Jun Seo leaned forward in his chair. What about the precursor weapons? Could we adapt their technology to defend ourselves? I have been working on that for months. The good news is that we have successfully reverse-engineered some of their defensive systems. The bad news is that even with their technology, the precursors still lost. Commander Jae-hyuk stood up and walked to the holographic display. What about the Council? Do they know about this threat? Unknown. If they do know, they have not shared the information with anyone. My guess is that their scientific stagnation has prevented them from detecting the approach. Then we have a choice to make, President Do Hwan said. Do we warn them, or do we prepare our own defenses and let them face the consequences of their decisions? The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some argued that humanity owed the Council nothing after their exile and humiliation. Others insisted that allowing entire species to be exterminated was morally wrong, regardless of past grievances. The Keth delegation pointed out that the invaders would eventually reach the Rim, whether the core worlds fell or not. The title. Representatives sang ancient songs about the duty of the strong to protect the weak. It was the Corvin ambassador who finally spoke the words that everyone was thinking. We are warriors. We do not run from battle, and we do not abandon those who cannot defend themselves. If we must fight these invaders, we fight for the entire galaxy. President Do Hwan nodded slowly. Then we prepare for war, but we do it our way, not theirs. We will offer to defend the Council worlds, but as equals, not as subjects begging for readmission. Director Yoonji activated her secure communication array. I can have diplomatic messages delivered to the Council within 2 weeks, but we should not expect a warm reception. Let them refuse our help if they want to, Jae-hyuk said. When their cities start burning, they will change their minds quickly enough. Dr. So-young downloaded her research files to the room's central computer. I am sharing all of my precursor data with the fleet commanders. We need to start mass-producing the new weapons immediately, and we need to train our crews in defensive tactics that have not been used for 50,000 years. The meeting adjourned with everyone knowing that their peaceful years of growth and exploration were about to end. The Rim Confederation would soon face its greatest test, not against the petty bureaucrats of the Galactic Council, but against forces that had destroyed civilizations across multiple galaxies. As Jae-hyuk returned to the bridge of his ship, he looked out at the Defiance one more time. The great dreadnought was already beginning its shakedown cruise, testing systems that might soon be humanity's last hope for survival. In the distance, construction crews were working around the clock to convert civilian shipyards into weapons factories. Commander, his communications officer called out. We are receiving a priority message from the exploration fleet. Captain Sang-ho reports contact with another precursor facility in the Outer Rim. This one appears to be intact. Set course immediately. If Dr. So-young is right about the timeline, every piece of precursor technology we can recover might make the difference between survival and extinction. As his ship accelerated toward the unknown, Jae-hyuk reflected on how much had changed since the day the Council had cast humanity into exile. They had expected humans to die alone in the darkness. Instead, humanity had found allies. The Void Swarm had come without warning, appearing at the galaxy's edge like a plague of living darkness. Admiral Kyung-soo watched the tactical displays from the bridge of his flagship as the first reports came in from the core worlds. Entire star systems had gone silent within hours of first contact. The Galactic Council's pacified fleets were being destroyed faster than anyone had thought possible. 22 years had passed since humanity's exile, and now the very beings who had cast them out were sending desperate messages to every corner of the galaxy. The invaders were unlike anything the Council had faced before. Biomechanical creatures that consumed both organic matter and technology, growing stronger with every world they devoured. Ambassador Hye-jin stood beside Kyung-soo, reading the latest communication from the Council chambers. She was Ji-won's former student, trained in the old diplomatic traditions but hardened by years of building alliances in the Rim. The message she held would have been unthinkable just months ago. Valtaris himself signed this, she said, her voice filled with amazement. The Supreme Counselor is formally requesting military assistance from the Rim Confederation. After 22 years of calling us barbarians and savages, the message is very careful not to admit they were wrong about us. It talks about temporary cooperation in the face of unprecedented threats. Kyung-soo studied the tactical map that dominated the center of the bridge. Red markers showed the advancing swarm forces while blue indicators marked the last known positions of Council fleets. The pattern was clear. The invaders were systematically destroying every military installation they encountered while leaving civilian populations alive to be harvested. What are President Du Huan's instructions? We offer assistance, but only as equals. The Rim Confederation will not accept subordinate status or council oversight of our operations. Captain Wu Jin approached with the latest intelligence reports from the front lines. His ship had spent the last 5 years patrolling the edge of Council space, monitoring the deteriorating security situation in the core worlds. Now his advance warnings were proving more valuable than anyone had hoped. The swarm has taken the Kepler system, he reported. 3 inhabited worlds, completely stripped of all biological matter within 6 hours. The Council garrison never had a chance to evacuate. Kyung-soo had studied the swarm's tactics for months, ever since Dr. So-young's predictions had proved horribly accurate. The creatures operated like a hive mind, coordinating attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously. They adapted to new threats within minutes, evolving countermeasures faster than traditional military doctrine could respond. How long before they reach the inner core worlds? At their current rate of advance, maybe 3 weeks. And the Council's evacuation efforts? Wu Jin's expression darkened. They are still holding meditation sessions to discuss the spiritual implications of fleeing from danger. Half their leadership believes that accepting the swarm's presence with peaceful hearts will somehow convince the creatures to spare them. The irony was almost too perfect. For 2,000 years, the Council had preached that violence only created more violence, that all conflicts could be resolved through understanding and compromise. Now they faced an enemy that could not be reasoned with, could not be negotiated with, and understood only the logic of consumption and expansion. Dr. Na Ri, So-young's most gifted student, appeared on the bridge's main communication screen. She was calling from the research station at Haven, where teams of human and alien scientists were working around the clock to develop weapons that could actually damage the swarm. "Admiral, we have had a breakthrough," she announced. "The precursor weapon systems we have been reverse engineering are effective against swarm biotechnology, but only when used in specific combinations." Explain. The swarm's main advantage is its ability to adapt. But the precursor weapons operate on principles that seem to disrupt that adaptation process. We think we can build anti-swarm missiles that will remain effective even after the creatures analyze them. Kyung-soo leaned forward with interest. "How many can you produce?" "With our current manufacturing capacity, maybe 1,000 units per week. But that is not nearly enough to defend the entire galaxy. It might be enough to prove a point." Ambassador Hye-jin activated the diplomatic communication array and sent a response to the Council's request for assistance. The terms were simple. The Rim Confederation would provide military support, but under unified command structure with Rim officers in key positions. Council forces would follow Confederation tactics and protocols. There would be no political oversight of military operations by Council bureaucrats. The response came back within hours, signed by Valtaris himself. The Council accepted all terms without negotiation. For the first time in galactic history, the ancient powers of the core were admitting they needed help from the barbarians they had exiled. The Battle of Kepler's Dream began at dawn, ship time. Kyung-soo commanded a combined fleet of 200 vessels, Rim warships equipped with precursor weapons, Council survivors whose crews had been retrained in Confederation tactics, and a handful of alien allies who had joined the fight despite having no formal treaties with either side. The swarm had established a beachhead around the system's primary star, using the energy to fuel massive bioships that looked like diseased whales crossed with mechanical spiders. Their smaller attack craft moved in perfect coordination, swarming over defending ships like antibodies attacking an infection. Captain Wu Jin led the first attack wave, his modified destroyer cutting through swarm formations with precision that amazed the Council observers. Where their traditional tactics had failed completely, the Rim approach of flexible response and adaptive targeting was producing real results. Focus fire on the larger bioships, Kyung-soo ordered. Dr. Nari's analysis suggests they are the coordination nodes for the smaller ones. The precursor weapons proved their worth within the first 10 minutes of battle. Traditional Council energy beams simply fed the swarm creatures, making them stronger and more aggressive. But the ancient technology that So Young had unlocked operated on principles that disrupted the invaders' biological processes at a fundamental level. Commander Zakth's Keth hive ship performed a maneuver that would have been impossible for any other species. The insectoid crew operated as a true collective, making split-second decisions that allowed them to dodge between swarm attacks while delivering devastating counterstrikes. The tidal vessels moved like water through space, their fluid tactics confusing the swarm's targeting systems. The Corvan fought with the fury their warrior ancestors would have recognized, their ships ramming into enemy formations when their weapons ran dry. But it was Admiral Kyung-soo's sacrifice that turned the battle from victory to legend. When the largest swarm bioship began adapting to the precursor weapons, he made a decision that shocked everyone listening to the fleet communications. All ships, this is Admiral Kyung-soo. I am going to ram the enemy command vessel with my flagship. Continue the attack and do not attempt rescue operations. Ambassador Hyejin grabbed his arm as he prepared to give the final order. Sir, there has to be another way. There is no other way. The swarm learns from every weapon we use against it, but it cannot learn from a ship filled with nuclear charges moving at near light speed. His flagship, the Pride of Seoul, accelerated toward the massive bioship like a spear thrown by an angry god. The swarm creatures tried to intercept it, but Kyung-soo had disabled all weapons and diverted all power to engines and shields. At the last moment, he opened communications to the entire fleet. Tell them we were never the threat. Tell them the real barbarians are the ones who refuse to fight for what they believe in. The explosion that followed lit up the entire star system. The swarm command ship was destroyed instantly, and the smaller creatures fell into confusion without their coordination node. Within an hour, the surviving Rim and Council forces had eliminated the entire invasion force. But the victory had come at a terrible cost. Admiral Kyung-soo's sacrifice was mourned throughout both the Rim and the core worlds. For the first time, in decades, Council meditation chambers included prayers for a human hero. President Do Hwan's message to the galaxy was broadcast from every communication array in both Confederation and Council space. The exiled had returned not as conquerors, but as protectors. The species that had been cast out for their refusal to abandon their weapons had proved that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. Velteris himself traveled to Haven to attend Kyung-soo's memorial service. The ancient crystalline being stood beside human Keth Tidal and Corvan mourners, his faceted eyes reflecting the flames of the ceremonial fires. I was wrong, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the gathering. We were all wrong. We thought strength meant the absence of conflict. You showed us that true strength means having the courage to fight for others, even when they have wronged you. Ambassador Hyejin accepted the Council's formal apology on behalf of the Rim Confederation, but she also made it clear that the relationship between the core and the Rim had changed forever. There would be no return to the old ways, no restoration of Council supremacy over galactic affairs. 5 years after the Void Swarm War, The galaxy bore little resemblance to the rigid hierarchy that had once ruled from the core worlds. Admiral Jun Seo stood on the observation deck of Defense Station Alpha, watching patrol fleets from a dozen different species conduct joint exercises in the space between the rim and the core. The massive station itself was a symbol of the new order, built with human engineering, Keth metallurgy, tidal energy systems, and precursor technology. It defended both the ancient core worlds and the frontier territories that had once been considered worthless. The war had changed everything. The Galactic Council still existed, but real power now rested with the Galactic Parliament, a democratic body where every species held votes proportional to their population and military contribution. The Rim Confederation held significant influence not through conquest, but because they had proved their value as protectors and innovators. Secretary General Yoon Ji approached him with the daily reports from across both realms. She had transitioned from intelligence director to the galaxy's chief diplomatic officer, managing relationships between species that had spent centuries in isolation from one another. The job required skills that no university had ever taught, because no one had imagined a galaxy where cooperation was voluntary rather than enforced. The former council worlds are adapting faster than we expected, she said, reviewing her datapad. 12 more species have formally requested admission to the Rim Confederation this month. And our response? The same as always. We welcome new members, but only if they understand that Confederation means partnership, not protection. Everyone contributes according to their abilities, and everyone shares in both the benefits and the responsibilities. Jonseo looked out at the patrol formations again. Keth hive ships flew alongside vessels from species that had once been mortal enemies. The sight would have been impossible under the old council system, where every interaction was mediated through layers of bureaucracy and protocol. Any word from the exploration fleets? Captain Sang Ho reports successful first contact with 3 more refugee species in the Outer Rim. All of them are interested in joining the Confederation, and all of them have technologies that could benefit our common defense. The integration of new species had become routine over the past 5 years. Word had spread throughout the galaxy that the Rim offered something the Council never had: genuine equality and respect for cultural differences. Species that had hidden in the darkness for centuries were emerging to join an alliance that valued diversity as a source of strength rather than a problem to be managed. Professor Seok Jin arrived at the station aboard a transport from Earth, carrying the latest research data from the Galactic Defense Institute. The ancient homeworld of humanity had been returned to them by unanimous vote of the Galactic Parliament, recognition of their role as the galaxy's protectors. But rather than becoming a monument to human superiority, Earth had been transformed into a center of learning where every species could contribute to the common defense. The new precursor hybrid weapons are performing beyond all expectations, Seok Jin reported. We have successfully adapted their technology to work with the biological systems of 7 different species. The applications for defensive purposes are almost limitless. What about offensive applications? Seok Jin paused, choosing his words carefully. We have deliberately limited our research in that area. The power to destroy is much easier to achieve than the power to protect. We want to make sure we never become the kind of threat that the swarm represented. It was a wise precaution. The Institute's research had already unlocked technologies that made the old Council's weapons look primitive. But the scientists and engineers who worked there understood that power without restraint led to the same tyranny they had fought to overcome. Dr. So Young, now in her 80s, still served as the Institute's chief advisor. Her hair had gone completely white, and she moved slowly with the aid of a walking stick, but her mind remained as sharp as ever. She had become a living legend throughout the galaxy, the human who had unlocked the secrets of the precursors and saved civilization from extinction. My granddaughter Yu Jin is leading the first expedition beyond the galactic edge, she told the assembled officers. We have equipped her ships with the most advanced precursor hybrid technology ever developed. If there are more threats approaching from the void, we want to meet them on our terms rather than waiting for them to reach us. The expedition was humanity's latest gift to the galaxy, the willingness to venture into the unknown to protect those who remained behind. Eugen commanded a fleet of exploration vessels crewed by volunteers from every member species of the Confederation. They would spend years in the darkness between galaxies, mapping potential threats and establishing early warning systems. Any concerns about sending such advanced technology beyond our borders? Junseo asked. Eugen understands the responsibilities that come with power, So Young replied. She also understands that hiding behind our defenses will never provide true security. Sometimes you have to go into the darkness to keep the light burning. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to Defense Station Alpha. Veltaris arrived aboard a small diplomatic vessel, traveling without the escort and ceremony that had once marked his movements. The former Supreme Counselor looked older and more fragile than Junseo remembered, his crystalline body showing stress fractures that spoke of years of guilt and reflection. "I have come to make a personal request," Veltaris announced when he was escorted to the station's main conference room. "I wish to visit Earth and speak with Dr. So Young before she passes into whatever comes after this life." The request was unprecedented. No council leader had ever sought a private meeting with anyone from the Rim, let alone asked permission to visit the human homeworld. Secretary General Eunji exchanged glances with Admiral Junseo before responding. "Earth welcomes all visitors who come in peace. But may I ask what you hope to accomplish with this meeting?" "I hope to find some measure of redemption for the greatest mistake of my long life. I cast out the very people who would save us all, and I did it out of fear and pride. Dr. So Young deserves to hear that confession from my own voice." The journey to Earth took 3 days aboard the fastest ships in the Confederation fleet. Veltaris spent most of the time in meditation, preparing for a conversation that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. When they arrived, he was surprised by what he found. Earth had been transformed, but not in the way he expected. Rather than becoming a fortress world or a monument to human dominance, it had been turned into a garden. Cities floated on platforms. Above vast nature preserves where animals and plants from 100 different worlds lived in carefully maintained harmony. The orbital installations were clearly defensive, but they were designed with an eye for beauty as well as function. Dr. So Young met him in the Memorial Garden, a quiet space where statues honored those who had died in humanity's exile and return. The elderly scientist moved slowly, but her eyes were still bright with intelligence and curiosity. They sat together on a bench beneath trees that had been brought from the Keth homeworld, their crystalline leaves chiming softly in the artificial breeze. "You have traveled a long way to apologize to an old woman," she said gently. "I have traveled a long way to apologize to the architect of our salvation," Veltaris replied. "Your people suffered because of my decisions. The galaxy nearly fell because of my blindness. How do you bear to look at me without hatred?" So Young was quiet for a long moment, watching the play of light through the alien trees. "Hatred is a waste of energy that could be better used for building something positive. You made mistakes, yes, but those mistakes led to something beautiful. How can you say that? We cast you into exile. We nearly caused your extinction. You forced us to become something we never could have achieved under your protection. In the core worlds, humanity would have become just another pacified species, contributing little and learning less. In the Rim, we discovered what we were truly capable of when we had the freedom to grow." She gestured toward the memorial statues around them. "Every person honored here died because of choices you made. But they also lived because of choices we made in response. Their sacrifices created a galaxy where no species will ever again face the choice between freedom and security." Veltaris's crystalline structure resonated with harmonic frequencies that So Young recognized as grief. "Can you forgive me? I forgave you long ago. The question is whether you can forgive yourself." They talked until the artificial sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors. Veltaris told her about the stagnation and fear that had driven the Council's decisions. So Young shared her research into the precursors, explaining how their civilization had fallen because they had never learned to balance unity with diversity. "Perhaps that was always meant to be our role," she said as the stars became visible overhead. "To be the catalyst that forced the galaxy to evolve beyond its comfortable mediocrity." "And what comes next?" "Eugen's expedition will tell us that." But whatever we find out there, we will face it together. Not as rulers and subjects, but as partners in the greatest adventure any of us have ever known.